Welcome back to the Quick Save Podcast. My name is Josh.
I'm Alex.
And today we're taking you into the wonderful and not at all depressing, scary, and sad world of Silent Hill 2.
Hey, you shouldn't go in there. It's, dangerous.
He says something, James says something like, I don't care even if it is dangerous. There's somebody I need to find.
Yeah.
But he sounds more like a robot. He's, very unsure of himself. Before we get really more into it, this is the final episode of what we're calling Season 1. We've got some seasonal programming, kind of pre-recorded stuff coming up for the next couple of months here. So this is going to be kind of the last episode that isn't like a theme episode.
For the next 3 months are going to be themed. We got Tony Hawktober coming up, like we've been talking about.
Yeah, Hawktober, looking forward to it. After that's going to be No News November, which is we're going to do kind of a long play of a game, talk about that for a while. Some other fun stuff planned for November. And then we're going to have UM December, which is going to be a bunch of PSP games. Looking forward to that as well. But this will be kind of the last bog standard episode here. So let's just jump right into it, huh? Silent Hill 2 came out September 24th, 2001. Developed by Team Silent. All right, Alex, our favorite game, Team Silent, which was a development team under Konami. Do they still exist?
Yes.
Incorrect.
Darn.
They developed the first 4 after Silent Hill 4, The Room. Konami decided, like they always do, making bad decisions, that they wanted Western developers to make all the Silent Hill games. That's where we get stuff like Downpour and Homecoming that are not as good as these PS2 era classics that are highly regarded. It's crazy. Maybe we should let the people who are good at their jobs make the games.
I know.
What do I know?
I've seen pictures of Team Silent, and they're all having fun. It's just this super sad stuff.
For the first game, the original team was 15 guys. For this game, it was 50 guys. They got a huge upgrade. But these guys were... we're going to talk about this. This game's a freaking masterclass of how to write a game well. It's the amount of, hidden little... if you're paying attention, you can figure this game out before you're halfway through it and understand what's going on. It's insane, the amount of little hints and things they drop in. But yeah, it is insane. Unfortunately, yeah, Team Silent disbanded, doesn't exist. Integral to this game's development.
I love how every game we've talked about, we're how many people were on that team? It's they were 10
none.
dudes.
Yeah, it's no guys. A PS1 title, yeah, they put 15 guys and said, I don't know, good luck, man.
Yeah, they crammed this out in 3 months or something. That. I think it's what happened with Ace Attorney. So it took them 6 months?
It was 10 guys.
Months?
They made it in 6 months. Yeah, insanity. The other thing I'll mention about this is obviously, just to mention it, so obviously we know it exists, and you kind of teased it a little bit, I think, in the last episode. There was going to be new Silent Hill stuff more recently. The franchise has kind of been in the gutter. The last game that came out was for the PS3, right? Homecoming?
Yep. No, I think Downpour came out after that.
Was after? Sure. The last Silent Hill game that Konami made, can you guess what it is?
PT?
It's a pachinko machine.
Oh.
It's a slot machine.
Oh.
Thanks, Konami. Great.
Oh.
Good use of the property. So it's a Silent Hill 2 pachinko machine. Yeah, and then PT came out, which was...
a disaster because of other things, not the game itself.
Norman Reedus and the Funky Fetus, as I like to call it. Kojima was going to make a game called Silent Hills. It was going to have Norman Reedus in it. Junji Ito was going to be a writer for it, kind of really bring Silent Hills back to life. And
my God, could you imagine Junji Ito's writing in this?
I sure could, because there was a playable trailer called PT, and it was amazing and took the world by storm when it came out.
So for those that don't know who Junji Ito is, an amazing horror mangaka.
Probably the most well-known horror mangaka in Japan.
If you don't know what mangaka is, it's basically just a Japanese comic artist.
Yeah, he writes and draws the manga. Yep. Yeah, he pretty much horror greats from all over Japan, veteran developers and people from the series. We're going to come together, work on this new Silent Hills game. Konami does what they do and said, actually, what if we didn't do that? Kojima go live in the basement, and that's when Kojima quit Konami and started Kojima Productions instead. And he said, I'm going to make my own Norman Reedus game with blackjack and hookers. You know what? Forget the video game. Futurama reference. But he made his own, he made Death Stranding. He said, I'm leaving, and I'm taking Norman Reedus with me. And he went and made Death Stranding, which is the first Strand-type game to ever exist. But yeah, so no new Silent Hill game. Just to announce that, get it out there. Yes, we know PT was a thing. Yes, we know that there are still no good Silent Hill games. I mainly mention that because I own a lot of games. They're good. They're scary. Anyways, we can talk about gameplay now. Sorry, I went on a whole thing about it.
All right. The gameplay of Silent Hill 2 consists primarily in moving your character around town of Silent Hill while solving puzzles, fighting enemies, and attempting to understand sometimes complex story. We loaded this up and we just started walking, man. It was a walking simulator into a actual horror game.
You meet what's her new Angela. You meet Angela in the graveyard. And she's like, "Don't go in there. Something about the town is wrong, and it could be dangerous in there." And James is like, "I don't care if it's dangerous. There's someone I have to find in there."
The game hides render distance through the use of heavy fog to add the sense of mystery the town has.
Apparently, we played the PS3 HD collection. Apparently, this is a fun fact. The HD collection uses beta source code from Silent Hill 2 because they lost the original source code from Silent Hill 2. So apparently the fog is not very good on the HD collection, but I've seen gameplay of 2. The fog is like insane on the PS2 version.
And like even on the HD collection, like
it was still
really good.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, without me finding that information out literally earlier today, I would not have known. So
it really does add suspense because you're just like walking down the streets. You're like, man, I hope I don't run into something I can't see ahead of me.
You're blindly pretty much walking into like enemies could very easily be standing there. So
as you progress, you will have to fight bosses and run through buildings that feel more like labyrinths to get the items that you need, all in the name of trying to find your wife. When you start the game, you get to choose the difficulty for fighting and the difficulty for riddles. We put action on easy and riddles on hard in an attempt to save ourselves a little grief in terms of the controls. There were 2 control styles, tank controls, and then thankfully a more modern take on the control scheme. They called them 2D and 3D controls.
Yeah, so it's in the PS2 and the PS3. All future versions have the like different control schemes you can switch to. Obviously, the first one on PS1 just had the tank controls, so they give you kind of the more updated scheme there.
And thank God. The game builds atmosphere amazingly, mainly through the sound design. When you walk through the woods, it sounds like something is following you. When enemies run away, they make an awful squishy noise. When you get near enemies, your radio emits static. Team Silent really knew how to make the most out of a limited amount of stuff that they could put in a game.
And this came out, the first Silent Hill came out in 1999. The PlayStation 2 was released in the year 2000. This game came out in 2001. This is 2 years after the first Silent Hill and at like the very beginning of the PS2's life cycle. It's amazing the work they did on this to like make it look as good as it does.
Throughout the game, you will get 3 melee weapons and 3 firearms. The firearms are usually something you should save for like tougher enemies like boss fights. You do have health and ammo, but you only can see them on the pause menu, which does make it a bit more of a challenge. You're taking a guess, really.
Yeah, there's no HUD in this game, pretty much at all.
Overall, there is a ton of health items and ammo, as well as infinite inventory space, so the game isn't going to be super hard. Death itself seems pretty sparse to come by, as we didn't die through our whole day of playing. There are a lot of items and hints that are easy to miss. For instance, the map in the beginning of the game, it's in James's car, but you could easily just miss off and wander about without it. There are also notes early on mentioning that if you turn your flashlight off, the monsters will not aggro on you, and we primarily tried to play the game with our flashlight off.
The downside here is you can't interact with stuff unless your flashlight's on. So
yeah, like they were saying, like there's a key on the floor, but if your flashlight's off, there's no key there. You turn your flashlight on, there's a key. Those are 2 pretty big and necessary items in terms of the map, hints that will help you throughout the game. It's nice that on the map as well, it marks it. So like you're like, oh hey, Ken's bar. There was something in there, and then like you go on your map and like you see it's like marked with a circle, like go here.
Yeah, if you go to like a street and the street's blocked off, when you open your map, it'll automatically be marked on there that the street's blocked off.
Yeah, all this just allows you to explore while not having to remember what row is closed off or broken, or hey, what bar was it, or hey, what street was that one place on. There's like all those like nice little nuanced things that get written on there that really just make it more accessible to play.
Yeah, and the whole concept here, especially with Silent Hills, the whole thing's very linear. They kind of like cut stuff off. So if you go through the apartment complex, you can't go back to the original starting point of the town. You can't go back to James's car or anything like that. So it's kind of like grab what if you see a collectible, you should grab it. If you see like health or ammo, grab it now, because the chances of you backtracking kind of get shut off. They kind of like push you forward and don't let you, it's not like Resident Evil where you're going to explore the whole police station 5 million times running back and forth and left and right. This is very much like, you're in this level, now you're in this level, now you're in this level. They kind of section you off
Yeah, there's
moving
one
you
part
forward.
where we're exploring the apartments, and there's like a gated bar that separates one half from the other. You find your way across that other half, you really don't get to go back to that first half.
Yeah, and you could, but it's just like there's kind of not a point. But it's like, yeah, once you're in a place, you can't really go. Literally, we didn't get there, but the third major level, I think it's the Historical Society. So there's 4 levels. I lied to you earlier, Alex. It's 4 levels, not 3. When you're in the Historical Society, you jump through holes in the floor. So it's literally like you're descending floor by floor by floor. So it's kind of like just like once you've beaten a floor, you just can't go back to it. Let's talk about the plot. I got a lot to say. I did a lot of work on this one because there's a lot to say about this game.
We did research, and then I left it, and I was like, hey, Josh, just make sure you write whatever else we need for the script for the episode today, and we'll come over, we'll record, we'll have a great time. And you're like, I just got done watching an hour and a half movie basically on Silent Hill 2.
Guy made a video. It was an hour and 40 minutes kind of going through the whole game. And I could have watched more. I also watched a 20-minute video before that about it too.
So here's Josh's TED Talk on Silent Hill 2.
Pretty much. I do want to say this going beforehand. This is a topic I'm going to talk a little bit about later too. I'm going to put a big trigger warning here if you're not okay with abuse of any kind, sexual abuse or spousal abuse or violence or suicide, any of that. This, I would just
this game earned its M rating for a reason.
Kindly skip this episode, please, because there is a lot of adult imagery and themes that I'm going to kind of get into the weeds about here, talking about the story. And there were even times watching and researching this where I was like uncomfortable. There's a lot of, like you said, the game earned its M rating for good reason. It's pretty intense. Yeah, without further ado, let's get right into it here. You play as James Sunderland, a man who was brought to Silent Hill because he received a letter from his wife. But that's so bizarre. His wife's been dead for 3 years. But this is kind of our first famous line in the game. She goes, "In my dreams, I see that place, Silent Hill." And the letter's like, "Oh, don't you remember you used to take me there? You always promised me that we would go back someday, but we never did. I'll be waiting for you in Silent Hill." There you go. That's our cold open here, right?
Where it all begins.
Yep. So he goes to Silent Hill. He starts walking into town. Grab your map. You walk into town. You meet Angela in this little graveyard. There's a church. She says, There's something strange about the town. Don't go in there. It might be dangerous." And he goes, "I don't care if it is dangerous. There's someone I need to find." And you can tell, again, like the voice acting, he's very hesitant. Like it sounds like robotic. You would think like, oh, it's just like crappy acting. But there are like plenty of dialogue lines way later in the game where these people just nail it out of the park and they speak like normal humans. So it's like when they kind of sound like robots, when they're like hesitant like that, that's like on purpose. He's like unsure. He's like, there's someone I need to find, because he's unsure, like if his, he's as far as he knows, his wife's been dead for 3 years.
Yeah, it's almost like they're in a state of confusion. I would put it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Because even Angela's like, I'm
like
looking for Mama.
Yeah,
my mother.
She's looking for her mom or her brother, her dad. She doesn't even know who she's really looking for.
And she's like searching all through the graveyard, and theory says eventually she will enter into Silent Hill.
Yeah. So it's just kind of all these people, and we'll see a lot more about why they act like this. Your goal on your map, you want to reach the park. That's where James thinks that his wife, Mary, is the name of his wife. He thinks the park is the secret place she's talking about, the secret place where...
Yeah, it's where she's going to meet him at.
Yeah, that's where he thinks she's going to meet him at. So his goal is reach the park. Done. Once you get to town, super foggy. Great. You wander around. Eventually you find a weapon, a big old 2x4. And you defeat some disturbing, like, fleshy creatures. I forget the names of these first creatures.
Straight jackets.
Oh, there you go. Correct. Straight jackets. And these just kind of, they vomit on you a little bit.
Yeah, they have no, like, their arms are, like, stitched into their body.
Yeah.
So that's why they called straight jackets, because they don't have arms to, like, attack you, but they still got their legs, they can walk around, and then they, like, open up their chest and can, like, vomit or something.
Yeah, they breathe on you, and it's yucky. So you walk through town. With some deft exploration, you eventually fight a bunch of straitjackets. You make your way to the apartment complex. Am I missing anything? Not really, right? I feel like you find some notes, some dead bodies.
Yeah, the game really kind of directs you all around. So like at first, like, oh, we're gonna take a straight path to the park. Well, you can't take that path. Well, we got to go down this route.
Go back and try another path. That's closed off.
That path's closed off. All right, we're gonna take this back kind of alley.
Yeah, there's kind of three points of interest that you can find that'll eventually lead you to go to the bar. You go to the bar. Bar says, here's the key to the apartment complex. Then you go to the apartment complex. Yeah, and then you go to the apartment complex. It's here we're going to meet a small girl, Laura, who's just chilling in town. That's cool, right? We just let children wander in these abandoned towns. That's awesome. We're also going to meet Eddie, who's kind of like a frat boy type. Apparently they're teenagers. They don't seem like it in the game, but Eddie and Angela are like teenagers,
That's
I think,
crazy.
in the game. Or I mean, late teens, early 20s maybe, right? Something like that. I think they're teenagers. Eddie for sure is supposed to be a teenager.
For those that know about Silent Hill, it's kind of a spooky idea that they're teenagers there.
It's also here where we're going to fight our first boss. We're going to meet the dreaded Red Pyramid Thing, or also as we know him more commonly by Pyramid Head. He's the first time you see him, he's behind these bars. He's just standing there.
He's like glowing red too, which is why he's called Red Pyramid.
It's scary. He's just standing there. He's standing there menacingly. You go into this hotel room. He looks like, the implication anyways, they don't have like features or genitals, but the implication is that he do be getting it on
with mannequin creatures.
Yeah, they're called mannequins. Yeah, they're like two legs stitched together. There's like two pairs of legs. So it's legs on the bottom, legs on the top. He seems to be getting it on, which is spooky, right? It's scary that like, oh, they don't just want to murder you. They also like theoretically have desires and urges. We'll get into more about that later. Then eventually after you get past that, we meet up with Angela. How's she doing? Not great. She's contemplating suicide. She's like, I deserve this and I should end it all and whatever, right? And James kind of talks her down. It's like, there's another way, like you don't do this, right? So she runs away. She's like, she has a very kind of repelling nature. She doesn't want to get close or attached to people. But in the apartment complex, you defeat Pyramid Head, and you defeat him. You essentially shoot him enough until he turns around and leaves.
Yeah, the greatest part is like we were looking at this, and as you're defeating Pyramid Head, air quotes, heavy air quotes there. So you're defeating Pyramid Head. Because you get that pistol by this point. You use the pistol, and the entire battle is ping, 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 ping.
And you're in a small area. You're literally just running left and right, avoiding his swings.
It just seems like you're shooting him with like a BB gun. That's literally what it sounds like.
Yeah, he's not phased. Yeah, the metallic noise of you shooting him is funny. Yeah, eventually he just kind of walks away into a big watery abyss. The water recedes, and then now you can leave the apartment complex. Yippee! Now, you're going to catch up with Eddie and Laura, who are in the bowling alley. There's some lines here where Eddie mentions he doesn't really care about the monsters in the town. And Laura, the little girl, mentions that she doesn't see them at all. But yeah, Laura runs away. You run into Laura again. She's sitting on a wall. And she mentions that she knows Mary, your deceased wife. And she's like, yeah, Mary and I have been speaking. You're like, what? She's like, yeah, I spoke with her a couple months ago. And you're like, that's a lie. She's been dead for 3 years. And then she goes, you'd never even loved Mary anyways. And then she runs away. What a raw thing for a child to say to another human being.
Who presumably doesn't know anything about James.
So then you make it to the park and you meet this woman. I don't have this written here. I don't know why I didn't write this as an integral part of the story. You meet at the park Mary. Just kidding. It looks like Mary. It looks like a more promiscuous version of Mary. And her name is Maria. And James, literally, the cutscene, he's like, you look just like her. Other than the hair and the clothes, you look exactly like Mary. Isn't it so weird that Laura was like, you didn't even love her anyways, and then he runs into a idealized version of his dead wife? Isn't that so crazy? What a weird town we live in.
So weird, man.
So weird. What a weird little town we live in. So after you meet Maria, I got things a little mixed up here. Then you go to the bowling alley, meet up with Eddie, meet up with Laura. Laura runs away, and you're like, okay, well, maybe a kid shouldn't be running around this hell town by herself, so let's go catch up with her. You go catch up with her at the hospital. Hospital's going to be our second big level that we go into. Go in, you solve more puzzles, fight another boss. They're like caged dudes who hang from the ceiling. The fight's very funny because they just slowly come at James, and then if they get him, they like grab James with his feet, and they kind of just like grab him and like, trying to like strangle him with the feet. It's kind of funny. It's funny to look at. It's kind of a very simple boss fight. All the boss fights in this game are pretty straightforward. Okay, yeah, so you solve the puzzles, you fight the boss, you explore more with Maria, who's mainly just kind of like criticizing you at this point. She like lies down because she's sick, and then you fight the boss and leave, and then she's like, why didn't you come back for me? And, oh, I was laying down sick and I could have died, and, she's like throwing this whole big fit. They kind of paint James as a very like weak character who's unsure of himself.
Even in the beginning, like, he runs out of breath if you run too long. And
yeah, he's definitely not, you're not this strong. Video games are usually this, like, I'm Duke Nukem and I rip heads off guys and I punch everybody to death. This game is very much like, you're like a weak dude who, like, he's not sure what he's doing. There's literally a scene when you're in the hospital where, like, there's a fridge that he's trying to open and he can't open it. He's like, Maria, can you help me open this fridge? And she literally, I think she has a line that's like, you can't even open the fridge or whatever. Like, come on, I have to help you open the fridge now. But yeah, so she criticizes you a bunch. And then, Pyramid Head shows up. You're running away, escaping through the hospital. You make it into the elevator. She does not. Maria gets murdered in front of you by Pyramid Head. Ouch. Now that sucks, right? Because you're James. You're looking for your wife who died. And then you pretty much just watched your wife die again. That's not great. So there's like a very sad piano melody track. You're exploring the underground of this hospital. Eventually you get out and it's very sad. You make your way through town. You go to the Historical Society. You find like a bunch of keys and stuff like that. Finally make your way to the Historical Society. This is our next third big level. Historical Society is where you kind of learn a lot about the town and what Silent Hill's about, stuff like that.
The game has a great way of, like, we're up to the third big level, but this entire time, we playing as James, you start to bond with him a little bit. You understand his frightfulness.
You're essentially playing through his eyes, right?
Yeah,
like you're seeing as he sees it. You're uncovering the mysteries as he's uncovering them.
Yeah, you're trying your best. So you feel like James is trying his best, but then like all of a sudden like things turn. He's starting to get really ridiculed. He's being belittled.
Yeah.
Psychological stuff's happening where, he's like, oh God, there's this bathroom and like, oh, there's someone behind the door. There has to be, right? So you're like pounding on the door, you're pounding on the door. There's nothing behind the door.
And then you go to leave.
And then like there's just screaming out of nowhere. You're like, oh my God.
Yeah. It kind of adds to this, like, maybe James is like a mentally unstable character, right? Like, is he hearing things? Is he, what do we, is like and then, unreliable narrator.
You're also kind of like, is the game trying to scare me? Is it trying to scare James? Who is it trying to scare here? Because at this point, we're both terrified. So, like, as we get deeper and deeper into the game, like, all this is just building on top of one another. Sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to really lay that as the foundation of, like, holy crap, there's so much going on.
So you get to the historical foundation. I haven't mentioned this yet, but levels kind of, once you defeat bosses or hit, like, a certain point, levels kind of get this corrupted status to them. So we saw this a little bit with the hospital, where you defeat the bosses and kind of make it through stuff. But once Maria dies, I think it's when Maria dies, as you're walking through the hospital again, escaping, like, the hospital looks way different. It's, like, rusty, and there's tarps on everything. It's all kind of covered up. It's all dirty and falling apart. So it kind of, like, after the town has kind of messed with James as much as it wanted to, then it kind of like reveals itself as its like true form of this like decaying, these structures that are falling apart. That'll be kind of a big thing in the next two levels here. So you go to the Historical Society, get in, there's more puzzles and exploration, but there's something not right. There's these huge holes, and there's like this staircase that leads into these underground paths, and there's a prison, and it's this whole thing, right? But James recklessly descends into not only the prison underneath the Historical Society, but as well, it's a reference of him descending into madness, right? Like chasing this. He's convinced his wife is going to be waiting for him at the end of all this, right? Well, it turns out he's not the only one descending into madness. It is the prison where we're going to meet back up with Eddie, who's begun embracing his psychopathic behavior by saying, hey man, he's got a gun in his hand. He points it at his hand. He says, it's no big deal to kill a person. You just point the gun at their head and pull the trigger. And you find him. There's a bunch of dead bodies around him. Don't worry. It's probably totally fine. Totally fine. You descend further into the prison and you meet up with Maria.
What?
Yeah.
What?
Oh, yeah. It's about to get really weird. The way this shot is framed is so interesting because she's like in this cell behind bars. So it's like you can't touch each other. Well, you kind of can through the bars, but like you're separated from this. And James is talking with her, and she's being like super flirty and seductive, and it's weird. It is weird. She's like, oh, don't worry, James. I can take care of you. And being this weird, like very sexy, like almost like taunting him. But she talks about how you're like, how are you alive? You were killed by Pyramid Head. She's like, no, I wasn't. And you're like, yeah, you were murdered right in front of me. She goes, no, we just got separated at the hospital. And I made my way down here. And then she starts talking about stuff that she has all this information that only Mary would know. She's like, I wonder if you still left that tape at the hotel. And, you're like, how would you know that? Only Mary would know that I recorded that tape, right? So she's kind of flirting with you. You're like, I'm going to make my way into your cell. So you exit the door. You enter her cell door. You find that she's deceased. She's been murdered. How was she murdered? You were gone for 30 seconds, right? But you see your dead body, and James he's like weeping again. He's very distraught again. Obviously, like it's like his wife has died for the third time, right? But then you make your way through, it's called the Labyrinth. Pyramid Head just wanders around this labyrinth. So you make your way through the labyrinth, and you confront Angela again. And she's kind of convinced that James is lying about his wife's illness. She's like, you're a liar. And she's like, men only care about one thing, and that's sex. Keen-eyed players will have found the article early in the game that says there was a man who was murdered in a crime of passion, and they kind of give you most of his last name. Well, his last name you're going to find in this level because it's Angela's last name. Kind of find out that Angela killed her dad. Her dad was sexually abusing her, and she killed him and came to Silent Hill. Yikes, right? So
yikes.
Yeah, and we find it here in this room. There's a graveyard with 3 empty graves. One has James's name, one has Eddie's name, and one has Angela's name. And there are these empty graves. There's some other graves in the room. One we don't know anything about. It's this person. It says traitor on it. It says like their name. It says like Mary W. and it says traitor afterwards or whatever. I don't think it's Mary. I think it's a different name. But then there is a name of a like a serial killer who murdered children or something like that. It's like you see his name, and if you found the note early in the game, there's a note that's like, this guy killed children and went to Silent Hill. So then we find that room. It's pretty spooky. Then we also find a big empty room with a gallows and 3 nooses.
Talk about just psychological landmines. I mean, it's just like one thing after another. The further we get into the game, the further depths of madness we reach.
Yep. And so, yeah, it was after this room you find out Angela killed her dad. It's been a whole thing. And then you also find out you're going to fight with Eddie here in a moment. You find out Eddie killed a dog, and then the football player whose dog it was came to attack Eddie, and Eddie shot him in the leg.
Wow.
Wow. So Eddie did all that because he was getting bullied and because of his weight. So he's fully embraced his psychopathic nature. He attacks James. Another boss fight. His line is kind of funny. He goes like, yeah, the football player have good luck finishing the season with his leg looking like that. And you're like, I shouldn't be laughing, but the way he delivered the line is kind of like funny just because he's like become so unhinged, fully committed to his like psychopathic side. So if 2 of the graves that we saw in that graveyard are for people who have committed sins, who have committed crimes, killed people or animals, well, that would leave James's grave. So we have here's the graves we have in the grave room. We have a guy who was a serial killer and murdered children. We have Eddie who killed a dog, and we have Angela who killed her dad. Well, that would leave James's grave. Ooh, what would James do?
What has James done?
What has James done? Well, after the boss fight, you walk out of the Historical Society. You've been diving down these holes. There's like 4 floors, staircases heading down, right? So you're gonna leave the Historical Society. Well, you're probably gonna be underground or under the lake or something, right? Well, you leave the Historical Society and you're at the ground level. You didn't go down any floors.
Wow.
So you walk out of there, and Laura gives you a letter from Mary. So I think you row across the lake to go to this hotel, and this hotel is going to be our 4th and final level. You run to Laura. Laura gives you this note from Mary, and the note goes over, hey, Laura, I love you so much. You're like a daughter to me. If I had more time, I would adopt you. But yeah, you kind of find out that so Mary wanted to adopt Laura, but couldn't due to her terminal illness. So then you explore through the hotel. Finally, the whole goal, you're trying to get to that hotel room that you and Mary stayed in where you left the videotape. And you reach that hotel room. And it's a stark contrast to the rest of the game. Everything else has been decayed and falling apart and rusty and monsters. This is a bright, the room is lit very brightly. There's white light outside of the windows. The whole thing is very clean and looks perfect. And there's a TV in the center of the room, and you find the videotape and you put the videotape in the TV. And this is where the game's ultimate secret will be revealed. And I'll drop one more thing here. This is going to be a huge spoiler alert for a game that came out in, 2001?
22 years ago.
This is the game's ultimate secret. If you don't want to know it, skip ahead maybe 15 minutes, something like that. But yeah, I'm going to go over it here in a moment. So, all right, James puts the videotape in the TV, revealing that Mary did not die 3 years ago of her terminal illness. She was smothered to death.
What?
By James.
What?
Yeah, James smothered her with a pillow while she was bedridden. James had convinced himself Mary died 3 years ago from her illness, when in reality she must have died much sooner. I mean, we have these notes from Laura that are from a year or less ago, like decently recent, all things considered. Yeah, so she must have died way sooner than that at the hands of her own husband. But now a lot of things start to add up, why James has been acting so weird and why he's been so cagey and why Laura's stories about Mary being alive don't really match up. And James has been upset about that. It's because he was trying to hide essentially the truth from himself that he killed his own wife. Now you leave the hotel room. As you attempt to leave the hotel, we're going to see that again where after these big events, the landscape changes. The hotel's now this damp, like waterlogged, moldy, things are falling apart, the water's dripping from the ceiling nonstop everywhere you go. And it kind of represents James's mental state, right? Like, not only is his sanity declining, but so is the state of the hotel and the town that he's in. It gets to the point you enter doors, and they just randomly put you outside of other different doors in the hotel level. Like, you'll enter a door, and it'll just exit you from a separate door.
It's crazy.
In the hallway. But yeah, it's like as if James realizing what he did caused his sanity and the environment around him to deteriorate. And it is this level where, if you're playing the game, you've had Mary's note in your inventory the whole time. And that's the beginning where she says, I see that place in my dreams, Silent Hill. If you look at the note in this level, the note disappears. And it's just blank paper in your inventory.
Wow.
Like the note wasn't even there.
The amount of thought that goes into that alone.
Yep. You run into Angela one more time. She's standing in a burning staircase. I'd have to watch the cutscene again. I read something where it said she had like two figures, like burned figures, standing next to her. I didn't see that in the cutscene that I saw, but maybe I wasn't looking close enough. I saw that she's supposed to have these burned figures in the background behind her or whatever, and one represents her father and one represents her brother that she killed or whatever, right? Something like that. But you run into her and you're like, hey, where are you going? Like, come on, like, we got to get out of here. And she's like, oh, what, you're going to save me? Oh, you just want to save me. That's what it is, right? You want to be there for me. You're going to love me and care for me. No, you're not. Nobody ever has. And she kind of turns around and she just walks into the flame.
Giving into her darkness.
Yeah, she's giving up hope, right? Yeah, and so James says, I can't believe it. It's so hot here. And she has a line where she says, for me, it's like this all the time. Kind of like her life is like a living hell, right?
Yeah.
And for her, that's kind of, I think the concept here is it kind of shows off the difference between the towns. How is this hotel burning? We just saw it was so damp and waterlogged and dripping water. How's it on fire in this scene? This kind of shows us what Silent Hill really does to people. It takes their trauma and physically manifests it. So for her life has been this walking hell. So for Angela, she sees everything is on fire. And like that's why she's repelling people like flames, right? You don't want to get too close or you get burned, right? So that's why she sees everything as burning, whereas James, who's in this kind of like huge depressive episode, realizing what he's done, sees everything as monsters and everything kind of comes crashing down around him. This is kind of your realization. The hotel's your realization levels. You understand what's happening here. You walk into the lobby of the hotel. Maria, once again, is killed by two pyramid heads. That's right. Now there's two pyramid heads.
What? Man, so crazy.
Now that James understands what he did to Mary, he kind of understands that Pyramid Head, he created Pyramid Head to punish him. It's his desire to be punished. That's what he wanted. He said, I've done this awful thing and I need to be I deserve to be punished, right? And so Silent Hill granted him that in the form of Pyramid Head. That's also why we see the bubblehead nurses and the mannequins and all these, like, we saw Pyramid Head, quote, having sex with these creatures earlier. Not really, right? But, like, clearly that's...
the imitation of.
That's, yeah, exactly. That's the idea. These all come from James's subconscious, right? Like, his wife is sick in bed, but he still, he still has these urges. Like, he wants to bone down, but he can't bone down with his wife who's terminally ill. So that's kind of where a lot of these things come from in nature. They're reflecting his subconscious. So he fights both the Pyramid Heads at once, big boss battle. Now that he proves he wants to live, the Pyramid Heads commit suicide. Then he goes up to the roof of the building, and Maria, who is another figment of James's imagination that was then subsequently used against him by the town to like undermine him. We saw those scenes of her criticizing him. She turns into a spooky witch cage monster because James walks up and he goes, "You're not Mary." He essentially rejects her and says, "I don't want to be with you." And she turns into a spooky monster and fights James. Then you defeat her. We get the most important scene in the entire game, James's confession to Mary. I recommend watching or playing the game for yourself to see this scene. It is very moving. Probably the most important scene in the entire game. He talks about why he did what he did and the reasons for it. XYZ. But this is one of the endings. There's 6 endings in this game. That's just the Leave ending. I'm not going to talk about all the other endings. There are some other good ones. In Water is the one that the developers really like. Makes a lot of sense to me. But Leave is kind of one of the more popular ones that fans like. But the emotion of this game is astounding. Seriously, at times playing and researching this, I was scared. I was sad. They did an amazing job with this.
The game does such a phenomenal job of getting all these emotions out of you.
Yeah, it's wild. Let's finally talk about something other than Paul. Let's talk about price.
All right, we're going to start with the cheapest going to the most expensive. Maybe this will surprise you, maybe it won't. We're going to go through and find out. So, starting with the HD collection, what we played on, we have the PS3 copy, loose 1727, complete 1790.
It's not bad.
Pretty average, I would say. Great price for 2 amazing games.
2 amazing titles, yep.
Then you got the 360 copy, which loose is 1990 and complete is 2749. Probably not that many were sold for the 360 is what my guess would be.
Yeah, it's more of a PlayStation series, right?
Yep.
So
going up after that, we're talking about the OG Xbox. Loose, this is regular black label Xbox.
Green label.
Or green label, I guess.
Pretty much.
Loose, $29.99, complete $42.64.
Makes sense.
Platinum, which is the nice silver case, loose $26.47, complete $36.50.
Cheaper for the re-release.
Then we go on to PS2.
Kind of the OG console came out.
OG console, loose $70.43, complete $105.25.
Yummy. I got mine sitting at home complete.
And then we got Red Label, which is $77.96 loose and complete $94.16.
Yeah, I have all of them on PS2 except for 4 and Shattered.
You know what's really funny is that you basically have all of them on PS2, and I basically have all of them on Xbox.
If you want to get the originals, Xbox is the way to go because it's cheaper. So.
Yes, definitely, by far. But wait, hey, we're not done talking about pricing yet. For the first time on the podcast, we got to talk about PC price.
I feel like we did this for one maybe other game.
Maybe?
For the maybe second time, we're going to talk about PC games on the podcast.
For the first time, we're going to seriously talk about it because it is very much a part of the Silent Hill franchise.
Yeah.
If you're not playing it on PS2 or wanting it for the PS2, you want it for the PC.
Yeah.
The PC copy, loose, that's disc loose, that's right, came out on disc, is $87.59, complete $132.50.
It's insane.
People love their PCs. PCs are very dominant for games as much as consoles are.
Do you want my information on the PC version of this game?
Sure, go for it.
You can swap weapons without having to open your menu. And there's something else about it. I feel like there's another kind of quality of life change that only exists in the PC version.
It just goes to show you. There's a reason they call it the PC Master Race as far as the console wars go.
Right. Let's talk about what we liked about the game.
So it's weird to me how the opening title of the game opens with like this super happy song. Like it just feels like it belongs in like an anime video or something.
Yeah, it felt like a My Hero opening or something.
Yeah,
like
it's just crazy. Like it feels like I should be in a Shonen Jump game during my training arc with just this like happy-go-lucky music. And like I think that's part of the charm of like the game is the fact that you start with this like happy upbeat music and it's a slow dive into madness.
Hype you up on your journey into your descent into madness. Yeah. Well, I'll say as someone very, very often, this game rings all the alarm bells for me. Spooky open small town, scary noises, unexplainable horrors. Really, this game is scary. We didn't even get that far, but man, I was scared. The anxiety of like rounding a blind corner and hoping you weren't going to run into some devil beast or something, right? Was terrifying. Seeing those enemies for the first time, the straitjacket and stuff like that, having to walk through the abandoned part apartments. This game and this team is amazing at creating a scary atmosphere.
I think we looked at the map so much that we could probably give directions in Silent Hill. Hell, I think we could run a tour guide in Silent Hill.
Get me to that hotel, man. We'll do hotel tours.
The map is such a crucial part of this game. Like, if you miss it at the beginning of the game, you are screwed. It is so important. And, like, it's just like, there is no indication of, like, hey, go get the map. Hey, you need this to move on. It's like, it's in the car, grab it, or don't.
Yep.
Your choice.
Yep. There's something about James, and I kind of mentioned this a little bit, where in the cutscenes and the FMV, like the videos, you can tell something's off about him, right? He has this air where he's like, he's unsure of what he's doing.
Yeah, we start off the game in a bathroom. Yeah. Like a public restaurant bathroom.
He's like hyping himself up, to like go do this thing. But yeah, this game, if you really paid attention to him, what he says, the things he interacts with, it can really kind of tip you up to the truth of what he did and how that what he did clearly impacts his choices, and it kind of sticks with him as a character development there. So yeah, absolutely.
And then let's talk about that save screen. So as you're going through the game, there are these little red squares that you can save at. You're like, that's nice. That's nice that they're identifiable. Well, you go to save, and just this neon red, like, brightness comes up and greets you with James's dead eyes just staring at you.
I think it's supposed to be a reflection. I think it's like a reflection of his face or something. Yeah, it's kind of goofy though.
So you get this nice like jump scare noise as you're saving, and like for a suspense horror game, like it gets you. Like you're like, oh, I know I need to save. Hey, I know this is gonna happen, and then like it's like dead quiet where you're at, and all of a sudden it's like just this noise out of nowhere. You're like, oh, all right, I'm saving. That's right.
And you're like, final thing I'll kind of say on this, just my thoughts here. This is a tough game for those who are in a rough spot. I really would not recommend you play this unless you fully know the story is going to contain elements of abuse, self-harm, stuff like that. Really prepare yourself for tragedy. This game goes into very dark themes. I've been in a rough spot and played games. I played Doki Doki Literature Club when I was probably my most depressed. Would not recommend doing that. This is one of those games, definitely do the research. If you're not up to playing this, put it down, walk away, go play something fun like Solomon's Key.
Yeah.
Walk away from this.
Pretty much if you're going to play a horror game, and a horror game that is like dead set on being scary and horrifying in other ways, Doki Doki Literature Club kind of surprised everyone that did that. Silent Hill is famous for being like this.
Psychological horror elements.
Psychological horror.
Kind of mess with you as a person.
Outlast is incredibly famous for the graphic, destructive, like, awfulness that it produces. The Evil Within just is like this non-stop heart attack. If you're going to play a horror game, really do look into these things. They are horror games for a reason. They all earn their M ratings for a reason. Don't just think like, oh, it's going to be a fun little game that I can just play through.
It's going to jump scare me and that'll be it. Yeah, some of the stuff is really intense.
It's heavy, it's intense. It can
be tough to swallow for sure.
Be real rough on you if you're not careful.
Well, let's talk about some fun facts. Alex, why don't you tell me about the bonus?
It's a bonus scenario, baby. A bonus scenario called Born from a Wish, which was originally published on the Xbox version, which is odd.
That's kind of they added a little extra thing for the Xbox version.
But then it was re-released on the Greatest Hits PS2 version and all future versions after that. In Born from a Wish, you play as Maria before she meets James. So it gives you a nice, more backstory into like their relationship and everything.
Yep. And also kind of, it's called Born from a Wish, kind of about Maria and who she is. Yeah, this game sold over 1 million units in the first month globally, which is like insane. That's like a ton, obviously, especially back in 2001 when this game came out. I'm going to get into some deep lore stuff here, kind of. It's not really lore stuff, it's kind of like behind the scenes stuff, but when we first see the dead body in the apartment complex and it's got the head smashed on the TV, that model of the dead body is James.
I kind of figured that. I saw that. I'm like, that almost looks like us.
It almost looks like him. It is. It is the same model. And it's also that's kind of your first big hint that the town is messing with James. If you go in that room, we did. If you go in that room before you're supposed to, there's no dead body there. The TV's just in the corner. We did that. We walked in. There's just a TV sitting there. I was like, there's a TV. I tried interacting with it. We walked away. You come back later. There's a dead body in front of the TV. Kind of an idea.
Blood everywhere. Jeez.
Yeah, right? kind of your first big hint, like, oh, the town is messing with your mind, right? That wasn't there before. And not just that, you might have some clue to the game's big twist early on. If you notice, when you get your flashlight in the apartment complex, if you look at the photo of Mary, she's wearing this like pink dress with like a white shirt. The dress that you grab the flashlight from is Mary's dress. Just like
those crazy little details.
Yeah, just like right in front of you. It's just like her dress. It's wild. The amount of little like nods like that are insane.
There's an optional message you can find in the bar after the hospital that reads, "If you really want to see Mary, you should just die. But you might be heading to a different place than Mary, James."
Pretty harsh. Especially that's
pretty real, man.
That's an optional message. You'd have to wander back to somewhere random and find that, like, intense.
So, let's talk about favorites and least favorites. This is, I would say, this is probably the toughest game we've ever had to talk about, like, favorites and least favorites on. Mainly for the fact that it's such a insanely intense game that it's so deeply positioning you as the character to go to these certain places at these certain times.
A lot of thought was put into this game, for sure.
But the game builds atmosphere like it's going out of style. Even with a slow beginning, you really start to feel the sense of isolation and suspense, like, really start to build. And slowly, all your paths to the objective are cut off. And you start taking back alleys that are poorly lit, and, you know, you're trying to move about. The eeriness that Silent Hill brings to the table is so real. Nothing I have seen in, like, I think Outlast is probably the last horror game that I was like, this is so real. This is, like, on top of it. The biggest complaint I have, and we talked about this a little bit, is the controls for walking. You're given the option between 2D and 3D. 2D is like driving a tank. 3D is like also driving a tank that's a little bit better to handle.
It's like driving a tank with a steering wheel instead of driving a tank like normal.
Yeah. It controls how you think an early PS2 game would control, especially for like a horror game. And once you get the use of like walking around and like how the controller works, like, it's not that bad. You can walk around pretty easily.
Yeah, you gotta kind of learn how to work it.
I think of like every early horror PS2 game, Fatal Frame, Kuon, they all kind of control like this, where it's like this weird walking tank control.
I mean, you can thank Silent Hill 1 and Resident Evil. It kind of popularized the tank.
Yeah,
controls.
Resident Evil definitely calls back to that.
My favorite thing about this game is the story. The game's plot is very tightly written, and at also times extremely vague. In the apartment complex, there's a door. If you go to open the door before you go talk to Eddie, it just says, "A force is holding the door shut." It's not, that's just it. It's not even like the door is locked. It's literally just like, it's like last minute they forgot to add something there. So it's like, at times, it is this amazingly crafted. Mary's dress is on a mannequin when you get the flashlight, and all this intensity. And then also there are times where if you go the wrong direction into the woods, at a certain part of the game, they literally catapult enemies at you. It is the funniest animation I've seen in the entire game. Literally from the tree line, like these, like the mannequins and the straitjackets, they just get flung over the tree line into the road. So you just see these bodies like shoot. I'm not kidding. It looks like they're getting thrown at you. It is a hilarious animation. It is amazingly crazy written thing. All this stuff is happening. And then they're like, well, what if the player goes the wrong way? They're like, just physically throw enemies at them, right? Like,
just casually catapult something. They'll figure it out.
Yeah. The whole story is amazing and silly at times and insane. Thought was put into every detail, even sometimes when there wasn't thought put into every detail. My least favorite thing is going to be kind of similar. My least favorite thing, similar to walking, is going to be the combat. Combat feels pretty clunky. There's like a lock on. James kind of auto locks on, sort of.
I mean, like, the idea is for us to be weak as a character.
Right.
And it does that, but like,
it just feels clunky as a gameplay.
It's rough.
It feels like it doesn't fit in properly.
It feels almost like there shouldn't be combat.
That's what I was going to say. Was it definitely feels like this game would benefit from not having combat or having less combat. And I say that even though there's not a lot of combat. I think the director of the game was talking about how he didn't want to put a ton of enemy types in the game, so there's 9 different enemy types. He's been on record saying, like, even now, he thinks 9 was too many. He thinks there should have been, like, 5 types of enemies, and that should have been it. He feels like there should not have been a lot. But yeah, we didn't get to any bosses in our playthrough, but I mean, looking at gameplay of fighting the bosses seems very repetitive. Run to this corner, shoot 3 times. Run to the next corner, shoot 3 times. Because you're just in these usually pretty enclosed spaces. So the boss fights seem pretty not good.
They're very straightforward. Like, you follow this formula, you win.
Yeah, which is not fun or interesting, right? I don't know. What do you do, I guess, right? You can't just... I mean, you could just have people walking around the whole time. But mainly the bosses seemed time-consuming more than anything else. But the final thing I just wanted to mention here quick, I might not even mention it because I don't remember to say. I feel like I had another behind-the-scenes thing.
The movie?
Not the movie. Alien slime, drink it all the time. I have no idea. Anyways, we'll just move on to... Why does this game deserve to be on the backlog? Well, let's talk about it, huh? Silent Hill 2 strays...
Let's take a moment. Please sit right here.
Yeah, sit down, won't you? Silent Hill 2 strays away from the cult story of the first game. The first story is about like a cult. They're going to make a demon god show up. You know, classic Silent Hill stuff. Silent Hill 2 strays away from the cult-based story of the first game, instead diving straight for a psychological horror game showing you the darkness that can truly reside in a human's heart. The sound design and the music and the story and really mostly everything about the game hit a home run.
A 10 out of 10, yikes.
If you're looking to get scared and also get really, really sad, this is the game for you. It's truly a classic horror game, and from this game, you can draw a straight line to games like Amnesia, Outlast, tons of others draw tons of inspiration from the Silent Hill franchise. The Silent Hill franchise has really given all future horror games kind of an extremely strong foundation for other games to look at and build on top of. And for that, we recommend you play this game if you're of sound body and mind and think you can handle probably the saddest and most horrific story put in a video game.
This was a big story. We read through all this, we did our research, we played the game, and there's something that always kind of stuck in the back of my head that I was like, man, this really reminds me of something. And I finally figured it out. If anyone has watched the movie 1408, the hotel room, you can really tell that it got like inspiration from this.
Yeah, there's this mystical force that holds you. It's different in 1408 because 1408 is not. It's not like he committed a crime. But yeah, the concept's similar where there's this supernatural.
1408 is that he feels guilt. Is right. The thing is he just is so guilty. He's like covering it up and everything.
Yeah.
But
this force is holding him.
The force is holding him. The room is like
to it.
The room is trying to make him commit suicide. It's just a gut-wrenching story. It got bad reviews for some reason. I really liked it. I thought it was pretty good.
It's okay. Yeah, I mean, it's not like the best horror movie.
It's not a 10 out of 10, but like
it's still pretty
the
solid.
Concept was awesome.
I'd give it like probably a 3.5 or a 4 out of 5. The final thing I'll mention here is about one of the other endings, and this is the ending that all the developers... There's no canon ending, but this is a lot of developers consider this to be their version of the true ending. And this ending is called In Water. So essentially the way the endings work in this game is if you heal... So James gets hit and you heal him right away, that's going to lead you more to good endings. Whereas if you don't heal him right away and you read the optional message where it says, if you want to meet Mary, you should just go die, except you might go to a different place than she did. There's kind of these like tasks that are required for these other objectives. You don't heal James right away and you read the message in the bar that says just go die, and you pick up Angela's knife and examine it. If you examine it, it's got blood on it, on her knife. So if you look at all these things, they're kind of like negative. The in-water ending ends with James committing suicide. He drives his car into the lake. And this is, again, it's not the canon ending, but other future Silent Hill games kind of mention that James and his wife went missing in Silent Hill. So it's kind of a bunch of the other endings. He leaves Silent Hill. Clearly, if people are like, well, he's still missing, this is, quote, kind of the canon.
Yeah, I mean, if the developers say, like, this is our favorite and this is what we think.
Yeah.
That's kind of canon.
It's like, they're all valid, but this is the one we like the most, right? You find out kind of in this ending. It's not as good because his confession, his wife essentially has to force him to say why he killed her.
I feel like that's more realistic, though.
Yeah,
I think he would try to hide it
that he still wouldn't admit it. Yeah, it's revealed that his wife's body in the novelization of the game, his wife's body is in the trunk of the car. But I think you don't see it at all. But I think the developers have stated that her body's in the backseat of the car. Literally, the car's with you right there in the front of the game. He's looking for his wife. His wife was literally.
It's how much he wants to deny that it happened.
Yep. And so, yeah, at the end of the game, he drives the car. He said, now we can finally be together. And he drives the car into the lake.
Which I feel is the most true Silent Hill thing that could happen. So, ending this off, if all this didn't tell you what Silent Hill is a place where you go to atone for your sins.
Yeah, you're essentially being judged for your sins. That's what Pyramid Head represents. It's kind of frustrating the creator of Pyramid Head is upset because Pyramid Head was specifically created to represent James's judgment. Like, he needed Pyramid Head to punish him for what he did. But Pyramid Head just kind of became the poster child for the whole series. Which is like, whatever, it's fine.
But... instead of just James's atonement demon, if you want to put it that way, it became everyone's atonement demon.
Yeah, he was kind of the judgment, the guy who kind of
so
passed
if you,
judgment on
like, the cool thing about Pyramid Head later in the games is that if your character starts seeing reason and being like, oh, I was a bad person, I need to atone for this, Pyramid Head will do good things. It'll save him, get him out of binds. But if you're dark and moody and fall into despair, he tries to kill you. And I know the movies do a good job of portraying that. It's kind of like what he's like thought of to do now, but like it's just a crazy character in general. Like I agree that they shouldn't have just like taken Pyramid Head.
Yeah.
But like talk about a more notable poster child for the Silent Hill franchise. I think the closest one after that is probably the nurses.
And that's kind of it. Is like he's cool. That's why he was picked. He wasn't picked because, oh, what a cool character element that we're going to use for the story. It was mainly like, wow, Pyramid Head stands out, and he's
iconic.
He's also he's very iconic and badass. So we're just gonna yoink him. Imagine if in God of War 2, instead of playing as Kratos, you played as like his brother Demos or whatever. Right? They were like, oh, we're gonna take the coolest guy in the game and take him out of the game, right? Obviously, you want to leave him in, like you said, iconic. So, but yeah, I think that's gonna be it for our big long finale here for Season 1, Silent Hill 2. We put the work in and did the research here. We'll have links down below. I also linked this documentary, Making of Silent Hill 2. Go look at that. It's really interesting. There's a ton of stuff I wish I could have talked about, but we didn't. All the like FMV videos were made by one guy.
That's crazy.
And it looks amazing. For 2001, the FMVs look amazing, especially when you compare it to like the PS1 stuff. Like the amount of work that got done in like 2 years to make this game look as good as it did compared to the PS1 version of Silent Hill 1's like insane. But yeah, I think that's going to be it for us tonight. Thank you so much for all listening to Season 1 of the podcast. Good things on the way. October coming up next.
We're excited to keep continuing and putting more stuff out there.
We're taking the next week off.
If you don't remember from the beginning of the episode, we are taking next week off.
Yep, so next week will be no episode, but then after that, we'll start October.
Full swing.
And it'll be a glorious, glorious month of content there. But if you have any questions, please leave a comment. Let us know what you think. What's your favorite ending of Silent Hill 2? Is it the one where the aliens come abduct him with the protagonist from the first game? Let us know. We'll drop an email. Send us information about Goblin Commander. Send us information about what town you see in your dreams and if it's Silent Hill or not. Mine is Baltimore. So how about you, Alex? What's the city you see in your dreams?
Oddly enough,
don't also say Baltimore.
It's not Baltimore. You wouldn't believe this. It's Baltimore. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh my goodness.
Nah. If I had to see a city in my dreams, it would probably honestly be like Chandler, Arizona.
Wow.
There you go.
I just lost $5. I took a bet that you were going to say Kansas City, Missouri. But yeah, that's going to be it for us tonight. Thanks so much for listening. Any questions, comments, drop them down below. Shoot us an email. Subscribe. Tell your friends. Don't tell James, though. He's kind of a Debbie Downer. We don't want that. We don't want to bring that.
James can't be in on this one. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, we kind of roasted him a little bit. So, all right. That's going to be it for us tonight. Thanks so much. I've been Josh.
I'm Alex.
Good night.
Good night.
Alien slime, drink it all the time.